always for we've had a whole year of great shows thanks to you as our technical moderator, and really pleased to be part of the community living campaign. So we always have something we talk about before we officially jump into the show, and I thought we'd just take a couple more minutes to talk about this amazing Joan Brown woodcut that is up at the Berkeley Art Museum.
So Rodney, why don't you tell me what you love about this?
Well, she had this, there's always narrative in Joan Brown's works, and we know she did a lot of swimming in San Francisco Bay and kind of famously almost drowned. It had to be a little harrowing, but here she is swimming out to the Golden Gate, which is not the safest thing to do. She's got the boat nearby to kind of keep an eye on her, and yet the person in the boat has their back to her. So I just kind of wonder about this. What's she trying to tell us here,
And also the way that the shadow of the bridge on the Marin Headlands is sort of like looming like that. It's a little bit ominous.
Yeah. Well, why don't we get into this, wait, hold on. I'm going to stop my share and then restart. We're going to talk about this exhibition at the Berkeley Art Museum. We have another exciting thing to share also, but maybe we'll do that at the end of the show. So the exhibition is called Exalt the Ephemeral, the impermanent collection at the Berkeley Art Museum. And this is all stuff that's in their permanent collection, but they want to emphasize that there's no such thing as permanence, I guess, right? The ephemeral is things that are changing, and nothing ever holds still in our world. What do you want to add to that, Jeanette?
Yeah, it's these I really like this play here on a permanent collection at a museum, and that these are really artworks that for some reason or another are not really permanent in a permanent collection. And it's not their status in the collection, but them as materials themselves, whether it's the material or the concept or something about it isn't permanent. And I really like that, that they have this whole exhibition focusing on that.
Yeah, there's always a tension in art. I would think part of the purpose of art is to make some kind of statement that possibly survives the artist. That will be something for the ages. But nevertheless, things do fall apart. Nothing is going to be here forever. So I'm gonna skip to. We're going to get back to that one later. But let's talk about the title. To Exalt the Ephemeral comes from a statement from this artist, and I'll read it. She says, "My gesture is addressed to the human body, that complete erogenous zone, to its most vague and ephemeral sensations. I want to exalt the ephemeral in the folds of our body, in the traces of our passage." And this is her artwork. It's called Lamp Bouche 2. And she did a lot of artworks that were based on the female body, and specifically her body.
And in fact, this one is her mouth. So I kind of think that it's interesting to think about if you were going to choose a part of your body to turn into a lamp, or a part of your body to create, and she like molded this on her mouth. What part of why did she choose a mouth? What do you think is going on here?
It's a little tiny bit creepy, I would say. It's a little weird. And of course, modern art, we want things to be a little, you don't want to see what you're expecting to see.
Well, what about it seems creepy to you?
Well, then it's disembodied.
Just the audience, does everyone else feel that way, or not so much?
Let's hear if there's any reactions out there. We always welcome that. We'll get to your question, Sherry, in a minute. We'll go back to that. But yeah, this it's kind of interesting that it's a lamp. You would think like of all the parts of the body, why would the lips be the lamp? The lips are, it would be better if it was like some kind of, it was a radio or something, right?
But if it's a part of the body, um, I don't know. I think the mouth is sort of, like you can illuminate things through your words. I think about the mouth seems really, really important in a lot of ways. There's so much sensory stuff going on in the mouth, our sense of taste, and just like the softness or the sensation of our lips. And then you have the fact that it's also one of the ways that we communicate most, not even just through our words, but that's obviously through our words, but also our facial expressions, like smiles and frowns and all sorts of things that happen around our mouth. And I feel like, well, I feel like during the pandemic when we were all masked up, I
Yeah.
suddenly lost so much of people's communication. Even though I could hear their words still, I saw their eyes still, I realized how much of communication and life really just is happening around the mouth area. So I love this, the idea of the illumination through the mouth.
Yeah, I was very conscious of this last week because I gave a tour at the ballpark, and three of the people on my tour were deaf. And all of a sudden, I realized it's very important that they can see my mouth at all times, and they
Yeah.
were good lip readers. But it just made me a lot more conscious of that. We're all actually lip readers in our own way.
Yeah.
I mean, we most of us have the hearing these people didn't have, but that is another way we communicate. Is there's a visual aspect of communicating through the mouth.
Yeah. But I do see, like, I think there's something about the plastic, or I don't know what the material is, but like the latex and false body parts that can feel like especially disembodied false body parts, because this is a mouth without any head or body attached to it.
It's
And
it's
and that
colored. I got the materials: colored polyester resin, light bulb, electrical wiring, and metal. So
yeah,
polyester resin.
yeah,
It's a pretty interesting material. It looked very lifelike.
yeah.
So this is where they got the title for the exhibition. It's one of the first things you'll see when you walk in. Should we move on, Jeanette?
Yeah, I just maybe take a moment to, in this world of the ephemeral, what here do you think is the ephemeral? We got the quote from the artist,
Mhm.
but, kind of just reflecting on what is ephemeral about this. In this case, I mean,
I think it's because it's based on her body, and she died in 1973.
yeah, it's
And
that
she,
the body sensations.
yeah, like she was diagnosed with cancer in 1968, and that became part of her art. She started doing even more body-related sculpture.
Yeah,
She was very conscious of this. She's also a survivor of Auschwitz and other concentration camps. So, I mean, someone who's very aware of
yeah,
life and death, I think.
yeah. And it's true. Our bodies are ephemeral.
Do you mind if we go back to the Joan Brown? We had a question from
Yeah,
Sherry about it. She said, "What? How do you know that it's a self-portrait?" And it's really, you do have to know her work to realize, like, she was a swimmer. She has a lot of paintings of her swimming in the bay. So I just assume that's her. It's
yeah.
a good
And she
question.
just
We just immediately went to that, and
Yeah.
appreciate Sherry
Overall, she
asking
has
that.
a lot of painting, especially at this time period and with this symbology, with all the cat symbology. She was painting herself quite a lot, in a whole range of situations. And so the fact that she paints herself so often and that she's painted herself swimming, yeah, we assumed that that was her in this one as well.
I'm gonna have to go back to this when I go back to the museum, because I think these must be the wood grains.
Oh yeah.
Isn't that great?
That's really, yeah, it's really cool.
All right, let's see if I can get to
Do
the
we have
next.
any other questions? Oh, how do you change the light bulb if it burns out with the lamp bush? That's a great question. I don't know. It could be, do we have one of the back of this
I
lamp?
did. I actually did.
Yeah, I think it was a really bad
Yeah,
photo.
it's like
Um,
basically behind this thing only covers part of it. So it makes it look like it's kind of completely surrounded, but it isn't. We're just showing the side. On the other side, you can see the light bulb.
yeah, it's all open on the back.
By the way, this would make a great Christmas present, wouldn't it? You know, or Hanukkah, Festival of Lights. So we have a question we want to ask folks about this artwork. This is a flag you'll see just hanging at the end of a hall at the Berkeley Art Museum.
Well, first of all, just, think about it for a second. Why, what do you think of when you see dust? At least dust in a flag here. Like, what are some of the things that come to mind?
It makes me think that we're all going to be, this is what we will all become eventually, right?
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about bodies being ephemeral, and and then I know also dust is of course ephemeral, and we all return to dust eventually, our bodies. And this artist really was working in the context in 1988 of the AIDS epidemic, and so was very aware of our of this of the devastation of AIDS and the death of so many people. Just um was very much in his mind.
And specifically, people in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And there is a San Francisco connection, which I didn't pick up on it until I read what it was. I don't know. I mean, if we ask you what is the San Francisco connection to this flag, I think that's a pretty tough question. But does anybody want to? I'm not expecting anybody to know the answer, but it is referencing a landmark in San Francisco that would, if you were in the gay community, you would know this. You would probably know this place. Placing it at the end of the hallway makes it inescapable. Yeah, it was really interesting that it was at the end of the hallway that, like that's what our lives are, right? We're going down this passageway and then eventually becoming dust. Is it like a quilt piece from the AIDS quilt? There could very well be something in this font in the AIDS memorial quilt. I bet there is. Is a special, so the font is special, and the four letters that make up the word dust are also an allusion to this place, which is a place south of Market. Like I said, well known in the gay community. So it's the Stud Bar, which is, I think, on is that on it's on like Harrison between it's like Harrison and Ninth Street, the stud bar. And oh, Gail asked, didn't it close? Yes, it did close, Gail, but guess what? It reopened. It's open again. Yeah, the stud is a pretty cool place. Before the pandemic, I went to a wonderful drag evening of drag performance there, and went there. I've been there several times, and as someone who's straight, I always felt like it was like a welcoming kind of gay bar, where it was okay for me to not be gay in the stud. Have you been, Jeanette? Have you been in the stud?
Yeah, I mean, back before its closure, probably not since the like mid 2000s. But yeah, I always had a great time. And it's the font style, as Gail's pointing out, it is the same font style.
Yeah.
that's used by the stud. So by rearranging the letters of the stud using its same font, and like the same scheme, it's I think that that's a really clever way of bringing up how, um, that is also one of the communities that is just was being ravished in the 80s.
Yeah. And yeah, I was wondering if they don't have a flag in front of that bar, but that is exactly the font that they use. And Nayland Blake is he is a gay man. They are in the gay community. I realize that's his pronoun, their pronoun. Born in 1960, which would mean he was a little young. He's probably young enough to. That's one of the reasons they would have been likely to survive this was they kind of had front row seats to the incredible tragedy that struck the gay community in the Bay Area. And he does other works of relating to LGBTQ perspectives.
Yeah. And like I think Sarah pointed out, this the placement of this flag, I think is just wonderful. To have it hanging there, not just on a wall and at the end of this tunnel, is just kudos.
Yeah, it's really the
Museum.
first thing you see when you go
Yeah.
to the exhibition. So this is in the first gallery. These are these enormous works by Ava Hess, who also she also has works in the permanent collection at SF MoMA. Actually, things that don't look that different from this now that I think about it, right? Same color. But what is it about? Like I said, it's mixed media. But what to you, Jeanette, is going on with this artwork?
Well, something that's so interesting about it, and I mean, I already know a little bit about it, so I can tell you what I find so interesting about it is, so it's canvas, but that's been treated with like a latex, that's been stretched over it. And what happens is over time, it starts to sag and fray and change, in all sorts of ways. And so, and the color, you can see the four of them, I believe they all started out looking identical. And then you can see they've all sort of changed color identically, but the way that they've they've gotten their their wrinkles and their frays is different. And it just reminds me so much of aging in general, or the passage of time, how it changes for all of us. This isn't quite skin, but how we're changing, as living things, and in a lot of ways, by making this material something that can change over time, it's becoming living in a new way, a different way.
Yeah, so it is very skin-like, I think, the color and the texture. And I think yeah, this idea that it's in flux itself. I've seen other pieces in museums that we went to one that had it was like this big thing with like pieces of ceramic in it that they said over the course of like it was going to be up for like a couple months that it would completely change. Like things would shift where they were located. I don't know what the time scale is for this, but yeah, it's
Yeah, I think it's for this one, I feel like it's also really important that there are four of them.
oh, okay. Tell me
um
what is it significant about four, you think?
because I think showing how the same thing changes in different ways is sort of important too. I don't know. I think that the impact, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, a lot of always a lot of impact with multiples because there's more, and you always have to think, well, why are there more? And in this case, seeing how it changes, the one on the right, almost all the sag is just sort of like hitting there right at the bottom, that like big one huge sort of wrinkle line at the bottom, whereas the second from the left has like texture all over in an interesting way. And then some of them, the corners are a little more frayed than in other ones, and just being able to reflect on the fragility of each piece, and how they seem to be fragile in different ways, while as also there's all this similarity as well in the color, and how, in that fact, they're all aging sort of similarly. And the quality, they're all getting this texture and this sort of sag and this change. Um, but that it's all happening differently, I think is really, I think it's important to have four. I don't think two would even be enough. Maybe three would be enough. Five might be too many. But yeah, I think that it's something important to have this repetition for this.
Well, Sarah says, think Andy Warhol, another artist who loved doing things in series.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
have another work that we'll be showing that is definitely a series. And it is just kind of an interesting, like that. So ephemeral, and also like things aren't the same. Things change, and things that you might think of as the same, like here's four people, but four people are going to be four different people.
And the idea of like things changing and sort of degrading, in this case, you can see how those corners are starting to wear out, and I'm sure the conservation team is like, oh, this is a nightmare. How do
Yeah.
we how do we make sure we preserve this art for future generations? Well, part of the point is that it's changing and becoming less stable. But the idea of the fragility is something I think we've seen in art throughout our history. This also, as different as this is, I also think about, a lot of those, if anyone has seen sort of Dutch Golden Age paintings of, like Memento Mori, where you'll have either like things that remind you of death, and sometimes that's a skull. Sometimes it's tulips that are starting to fade and wilt, or insects in paintings where you can see the damage that they're doing, and dust, and oftentimes, like stopwatches or clocks, these reminders of time in the paintings. And this is just, it feels like, in many ways, this completely modern take, but this same idea of, well, remember, yeah, the ephemeral. We're all here for a short time on Earth, and we're all changing through the whole time, and not just aging, but like our personalities are changing and evolving, and yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah. I mean, the
fan.
funny thing about all this idea of change is that the exhibition itself has changed since Jeanette and I went. It's been a little while now. Went like almost 2 months ago.
Is it that
And
long?
then a whole bunch of the artworks that we saw actually came down and were replaced by other artwork. So the exhibition itself is ephemeral.
Yeah.
Um, this is another one that is still up. And it's called Untitled, like so many things in modern art, but it's by Felix Gonzalez Torres, who he died very young. He was someone who died in the AIDS epidemic. And it's just this pedestal with sheets of paper that they invite you to take. And you can see on the paper, it says Helms Amendment 1987, Anita Bryant 1977, High Tech 1980, Cardinal O'Connor 1988, Bavaria 1986, White Night Riots 1979, FDA 1985. And these are all things that kind of relate to the gay community in dates. That's all he does is give us these names and these dates.
So just sort of, you know, put it out there. You don't need to answer, but do all of you know the references to at least some of these dates? Or people
They're
or
all
events?
horrible things
Yeah.
that happened through the years. I mean, I was going to say, how is this art until you started saying what was on these pieces of paper? And then I was deeply moved.
Yeah.
Well, that's really great, Sherry, that that's it. That's the whole point of it. And this is something that moved you by a person who's been dead for 28 years.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of his purpose.
And I really like that it's just, these 2 rows at the bottom of the sheet of paper. And it's a completely blank paper other than that. And just these 2 lines where it has the text that are just events and dates or people and dates. And one thing I wondered is, how do the kids today, like young folk, relate to this? People that have been born in the 90s and beyond. I think probably everyone on this call was alive at the time of these events.
There's a couple. I don't know what the Bavaria 1986 is a reference to, and I'm also not sure about the High Tech 1980.
I don't know high tech.
Like that, there's something in his mind
Yeah.
about it, but something happened
Yeah.
obviously in Bavaria. The White Night Riots were after the acquittal of Dan White.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
acquittal. Wasn't he? He was found guilty, but only of
Because he ate
manslaughter.
too many Twinkies.
Right.
Yeah,
The sugar made him
Wasn't
do
considered
it.
first degree murder.
he
Yeah.
didn't have as much of a punishment as people had expected and hoped for. But
Yeah.
the other thing that struck me at first, and I have some thoughts on, is how much of a waste of paper it is. I mean, I'm thinking about resources, and it's, then I realize what terrible waste of life. I mean, I don't know if that's part of it or not, but it's
But
just,
it is in my mind, Sherry, when you have a thought related to an artwork, it's all valid.
Yeah. I'm guessing, I don't know if in 1988 we were also quite as aware of or thinking. I don't remember if I was thinking like, oh, what a waste, like we don't want so much paper in the world. Maybe, but one thing that's I think he's trying to do um is that this is paper you can take with you. So, today, like we can take a photo of it and remember, or, we don't need to take that piece of paper. But in 1988, you could take a piece of that artwork home. And today, you can take a piece of that artwork home by taking one of the pieces of paper with you.
I,
And
I
so,
took I took mine with me
oh, you did.
here.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't take one because yeah. But yeah, I think that there's something really inclusive about the fact that you are part of the artwork. For me at least, I feel like the art that piece of paper, it's not framed on the wall for us to contemplate. It's something for us to take, and we become part of the artwork when we take it. Um, and I hope that, some of the younger people will go and look up events if they don't know them. Maybe not all of them, but something. And so it's also allows you time to do some research or do some thinking about it.
And you got room to write your thoughts down too.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly. So it's and in an analog way with an actual piece of paper. But yeah, I totally get it that I tend to eliminate paper in my life, but I feel like there's something special about trying to have this other relationship to visitors in the museum where they don't just see you, but they can take a little bit of you home.
I'll read a couple of thoughts in chat. Terry
Yeah.
says Ronald Reagan was president in 1985 and was terrible about the AIDS crisis. I'll just add to that. Yeah, he
Yep.
didn't use the word AIDS for many years.
Yeah.
And then Ron says, looks like the captions for pictures that aren't there. You have to imagine the images.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
that's
like
the
that. Yeah.
point. You know, Ron, Anita Bryant was a Christian singer who spearheaded an anti-LGBTQ movement. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think she's still alive, and one of her granddaughters is gay. Interestingly, another thing that Felix Gonzalez Torres did, he did other artworks, including one where he would have the museum put out candy, and it was I think the weight of his lover who died in the AIDS epidemic before him in candy, and you were supposed to take the candy. You were supposed to take candy and take it with you and consume it. Yeah. What about you, Jeanette? Are you familiar with other Felix Gonzalez Torres works?
Yeah. There was one that we had in SF MoMA too, where it was um like a rectangle, a photograph of a bird flying in the sky. And I think if I remember, that bird was supposed to be representing like the soul of his lover who died from AIDS. And in that case, I did take one of those posters, and
You
um,
still have it?
I still have it. I haven't
Okay.
hung it yet though, and it's been years, so I should get on that. Um, but yeah, it felt, and that's why I was like, I felt like by taking that poster of his, this bird that's like the soul of his lover, and I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself by taking the poster. So yeah,
Yeah,
really.
I believe that poster was on the floor, but this one's on a pedestal.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure why. Do you see significance in the pedestal?
Um, well, yeah, no, I don't know. It could just, these days I think, oh, it's easier than bending over.
Right, it's better for
But I don't know if
us.
there's something more significant than that.
So cool stuff to think about. Let's keep going. We got more stuff. So here's a series. Now we unfortunately have to admit to you guys, this is one of the pieces that came off the wall, but I got pretty good pictures of it. And so it is called Arc of Total Eclipse, February 26, 1979. And it's 29 prints of newspapers from this total eclipse that went across the United States. And it starts with the Oregonian and it goes to the Grand Forks Herald. So this trajectory of the eclipse, it kind of follows that and just shows you, all it does is show you the masthead of the newspapers and then the photograph of the eclipse that they ran. So it's kind of like the same news event being communicated about in 29 different ways. Here's like what the Daily Historian looked like. And Jeanette, I know you and I just really loved this piece, but what is it? What makes this interesting to you?
Well, again, I love a series,
Yeah.
apparently. But yeah, what I like is the way the so the eclipse is on all of the front pages of all these papers, and just to be a little bit silly here, it's like, oh, I could use more front page, like natural events and interesting science and like a relief from other news.
Yeah,
But
because this eclipse isn't going to be inflicting pain upon us for,
no,
say, a period of 4 years
no.
or so.
And it's
Uh,
like the joy of discovery and science. I mean, I know that we still love a good eclipse, of course, but not always front page worthy. But yeah, I know, Rodney, this is also one of the ones you really liked. What did you find so appealing about this?
well, one of the things is, it's newspapers, right? And so something that's ephemeral, and the artist might not even been thinking about this, but the newspaper world is a very different place today than it was then. In fact, newspapers are often consumed not on paper anymore. I do not get a newspaper on paper myself. I get digital editions. So this is from an era when the newspapers were still pretty healthy, 1979. And and there was a period in this a very long period in this country where they were ubiquitous. This was really like the number one way of getting your news. And places like San Francisco had multiple newspapers. I mean, I guess we kind of nominally do, although I haven't seen an Examiner in a while. So that's part of it. It's part of this whole ecosystem of information sharing. And then you can see that they all make different decisions about this eclipse. Some of them like takes up almost the entire page. Some of them it doesn't take up much space at all. So just like all these different news decisions being made. Those were among the things I appreciated about it.
Yeah, Sarah wrote, it allows you to chase the eclipse without traveling. This exhibition, I like that.
Yeah, we're
The
gonna.
series of it, because we are going from city to city in the newspaper. And I like you mentioned like the different placement and the different size, but that also gives a sense of rhythm and traveling, I think, is if they were all in the same place, it would be different, but that these photos kind of go up and down and you get that feeling of moving through 2D space at least. Like a flip.
Yeah. So the artist Sarah Charlesworth, she did a lot of different series. She really liked working in that realm, and she often did series of newspapers like this, but of things that were more consequential, things that weren't so, I'd say, neutral as in Eclipse. So yeah, she's pretty interesting. I know um, she did a series of people falling out of buildings, which
Yep.
is kind of dark. She did a series called Modern History, where she didn't even have a particular news story in mind, just 29 different newspapers on the same day.
Oh,
So
yeah.
she just was a really interesting artist, and kind of great that they could fit her into this exhibition, and that this piece is part of the permanent collection of BAMPFA.
Yeah. And I like there's something just even visually stunning about the eclipse itself. Even in black and white, even in, bad reprint newspaper print. There's just something really compelling about an eclipse. And so it's nice. Remove all the text, remove all the words. Let's just let's just see these this sort of visual symbol of, yeah, like discovery and awe and wonder in science.
Well, it's also an event that connects us to people throughout human history.
Yeah.
Although I have to
And
say that most of them were just like, oh, cool, there was an eclipse. Most of them were like terrified.
yeah,
Somehow,
yeah.
God
That's
was
true.
upset and he was eating up the sun. And this was,
Yeah.
we'd obviously done something very, very wrong.
But
Uh,
this does connect people in different places as well, as it went over all of these different places. And I do wonder, you were mentioning all of these newspapers. I wonder how many of these newspapers still exist,
yeah.
at all, or as print, or um,
The answer is going to be not all of them. I will just
yeah,
tell you that, not all of
yeah,
them, but it'd be pretty interesting to find out.
yeah.
I love old newspapers. Just as an aside, if you have a San Francisco Public Library card, you can go on the main library website, go to the San Francisco History Center, and you can have free access to hundreds of newspapers in their archives going back to like the 19th century. And
That's
I take advantage of that, and it's a ton of fun. If you want to read like a Herb Cain column from like 1946 or something, you can do that. All right, let's so we are going to now ask a question
yeah.
for you in the audience. So I hope you're all sitting down. Ready to ask the question. Go ahead, Jeanette. Ask them your
Okay.
question.
So imagine you are going to create an artwork out of something that's ephemeral, and we'll choose the wind. Okay. It's something ephemeral. How would you choose to represent the wind? What sort of medium would you use? Would it be a painting, a sculpture, a drawing? What colors, if any, would you use? Would it just be black and white, or would you use colors? What sort of shapes or movement would you want? And as you're thinking about the wind, if anyone wants to share before we go to the next slide, that would be great. It's also okay if you don't want to.
You can take the Fifth Amendment if you want.
Yeah.
But I won't do that. I'll say, Jeanette, that I think I would use charcoal on some kind of really thin-skinned paper, and I'd want different shadings, and I'd want it to be thicker and thinner in places. And that's kind of where I would go with that. I see Sherry has said lines and blues and grays for the wind. And Sarah says something Van Gogh-like would be nice. Yeah, you get that incredible movement in the
Yeah.
works of Van Gogh. Anyone else? It's kind of cool that we have this blank canvas right here. I wish,
Yeah.
fortunately, they don't give us the I can't make images on this thing. Gail says a room with a fan, and then electronic medium peeps could choose from you could choose from to create their happy memory of a windy day.
Oh, that's
Good. That's
cool.
so an installation by Gail.
Yeah.
We'll give you a
I like
gallery for
it.
that, Gail.
Yeah.
But this is what they have up at BAMPFA. This is called The Wind by Hans Hofmann. And we did have I think it was Sherry who said lines and blues and grays for the wind. Well, I think Sherry is the one who comes the closest to what Hans Hofmann did.
Yeah. It's got some Van Gogh like swirls in there as well.
I guess it does.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think, yeah. So, how I love the fact that everybody came up with something a little different, though, because how do you represent something like the wind, something that's not tangible? You can't hold it in your hand. And how do you think Hans Hoffman did? Do you like it? Do you think it's wind-like, not windy enough?
One way to portray the wind, which has been done many, many times, of course, would be to do with audio.
Yeah, yeah,
That is not that's kind of the obvious way to go, I think. And that's you see that in film, you see that in you could just have a gallery and you could have like a wind kind of sound.
yeah. One thing for me about this that I find super interesting, so it's got, I think, we all kind of, or many of us thought about the blues and the sort of grays, but there's a lot of black in this one. There's a whole corner that's pretty dark. And I think, for me, I don't think wind, I don't think of so much darkness with it, though, there are lots of windy nights. But when I just think wind, I probably don't put so much darkness in there, and I'm not sure. Kind of gives it a more like menacing wind feel to me, at least. I don't know. I think, have there been some more comments?
Yeah, well, Sherry says, to me, it shows the chaos of the wind. We've been having some of those days lately. Yeah, we had one not too long ago and knocked out our power for 10 hours. So that was kind of the black would definitely be evoking that experience. Gail says, looks like a nightmare depicted as a painting. I'm kind of
Yeah.
with you on that, Gail. To me, it was not my idea of wind, but it was intriguing. And then Ron says, that looks like my backyard after the last windstorm. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
getting,
And that's another thing is, like how another way to depict wind is the aftermath of too much wind, the chaos left behind, which yeah,
yeah. Then,
is a little bit. But yeah, I think that the frenzy of the lines could just be like the movement, but by adding, for me again, that darkness, the black, it does take it a little bit more into the chaos and nightmare that I think a lot of you are picking up on.
yeah. Why don't we move on? We got more stuff to talk about. Um, so this is, maybe I should pair this up with the eclipse because it's kind of
Yeah.
related in that sense. It's called Distance of a Day. It's a video on two iPhones. I didn't put the date in, but it was like done a bunch of years ago, like more like mid, like 2015. I don't know if we remember.
Yeah, I think it was 2015.
And David Horvitz, he made a video in the Maldives of a sunrise, and then his mother was in California at exactly the same time, and she's seeing the sun set.
Yeah, they're
So it's the
separated by
same
12
sun
hours.
rising and setting on two iPhones, and kind of, I don't know, kind of fascinating. He's a really interesting artist who likes to use the internet for a lot of his works.
I
And
think it does pair, like you mentioned, does pair really well with the eclipse. One of the things a couple of people mentioned, I think, about the eclipse is like that traveling through time, or like chasing the eclipse almost, and like having the same experience in different places. And I like that for this, it's being separated exactly 12 hours from your family. So you're on like exact where different that different time, that in the same moment your mom can be seeing the sun set as you see the sun rise. You see the sun rise and set, and that it's the opposite there. But that you can connect this way by both like at the same moment taking this video. It's like you're not in the same place at the same time, but you're having this experience together of the movement of the sun and how integral it is to our life, that and to be connected. And of course, again, I think I'm gonna again reference, the pandemic for for the second time during this, but the fact that it feels so relevant today after spending all this time shut in or shut away and not being able to visit family easily um, during some of those 2020, 2021 years. It's just the ways that people find to connect with each other via media, for me, makes this another step beyond just art. I can connect to that really personally, and feel like how it's so the technology to be able to do this and to feel like we're in together having the same experience even though we're apart is important.
Yeah, and the technology is slowly changing in changing our lives, and that's another. It's kind of another
Yeah.
part of the ephemeral theme. Gail says, "I like how the sunrise is on a white iPhone and the sunset is on a black iPhone."
Yeah.
And also note these are older iPhones now. They got that little button in the middle that has since gone away. So they're kind of like helping us think of our lives in that way. And then they're showing the beginning of a day and the end of a day in two perspectives on the same subject, which almost makes this cubist.
Ah.
Or maybe it's rectangulist or something. So that's a fun one. We'll go. Oh, here's the artist. So I like he's wearing his standard issue artist T-shirt. Every artist when you graduate from art school, they give you one of these gray T-shirts all the time. All right, this is the least favorite work in the exhibition for the students who work as gallery. What do we want to call them? They're kind of guards. They're kind of gallery
Cards, yeah.
chaperones. But this is just a framed piece of paper with the word "please touch" on it. It's all by itself, but often it's shown in series with a set of others that say "do not touch." And so I always love asking the poor student who is in the gallery, how many times today has someone tried to touch that? And they always say too many. And a number of people do succeed. I think that they have to constantly be, cleaning the glass for this one. And Jeanette, do you know the story behind this?
I don't. Yeah. Do you?
Yeah, well, apparently Bruce Conner, he's like a real provocateur and in the art world. Of course, he was a San Francisco artist who hung out with the hippies and later with the punk rock movement. We did a whole wonderful exhibition on him at SF MoMA in 2016. But one of his artworks were put up in a museum, and it said, "Please do not touch." And he, as the artist, was like, I want people to touch this. I have no problem with them touching it. And he was really upset about that. And so he like thought it was like, who are you to say what people can do with my artwork? So he created this "please touch" and "do not touch" just to kind of call out how the museum is controlling how people experience the art. I know I'm kind of a rule follower myself, and I've actually told people I've seen people touch art at art museums, and I will be the person who says you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
I will take it upon myself to especially if it's something that looks like it would be pretty bad for the artwork for a lot of people to be touching.
Yeah. And I think, having been a tour guide in a museum for a museum, we know well, like, but I do think about it. There are always, I think at least every few years, I go to an art exhibit where I know that one of the works was actually meant to be interacted with or meant to be touched, meant to be original intention by the artist. And I always feel like, well, I feel conflicted. I feel like we're missing as a visitor, as a viewer, I missing part of the experience by not being allowed to interact with the work. as the artist originally intended.
Well, here's one you can touch, right?
Yeah. And
There's
then
actually two. Yeah.
I also feel like, as someone who's worked in museums, that of course they can't touch it, because the idea is for it to survive for so many generations, and
Yeah.
by people interacting and touching it. Every time there's an interaction, there's something that changes, whether it's just the oils in our fingers, or there is a possibility of destroying it in its current state. So there's a lot of tension there that I think is like the subtext behind the please touch.
Yeah, it is. It is like this tension. All right, we're kind of running out of time. I want to go to this thing that we want, especially I'm just going to bring this thing back up because it is the holidays, and we've got the Festival of Lights, Hanukkah, and Christmas is kind of all about lights. But I don't know how many of you guys got to see this, but this light show on the Ferry Building, and there are about 8 different locations in downtown San Francisco. Did anybody out there get a chance to see this? Because I found it really delightful. Let's Glow San Francisco. And they did it for 2 weeks. It's unfortunately over now. But my hope is that they're going to do this again next year, because they created all these amazing light shows for San Francisco buildings. They were also at the Stock Exchange. That was a really wonderful one. 101 California, and a few other buildings around downtown. And I know, Jeanette, you wanted to see this, but you weren't able to get there.
Yeah,
They're just going to have to bring this back. I went
they
with,
just have to.
yeah, I went with Sarah, and we were watching this, and I said, this is better than anything on Netflix right now. Just sitting in the middle. They put out lawn chairs actually right across from the Ferry Building. So when we were filming this, we're in a lawn chair with we'd been at the Taddage Grill, and the couple that was sitting next to us, we told them about this, and they wanted to come and check it out with us. So they did. And it's about a I don't know, 10 or 15 minute sequence of there's multiple shows by multiple light artists. So this is a cool thing that our city did, and hopefully
Yeah.
we'll do again. Don't you love seeing the Ferry Building turned into a corkscrew,
Yeah.
and then maybe a Christmas tree?
It really is amazing.
Yeah, I found it really
I like
delightful.
this. I like seeing the cogs and yeah, very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Rodney.
And with that, we will thank you guys all for tuning in. And we've had a great year on Art Viewing Adventures. Jeanette, you've been a guest a few times this year, so
Yeah,
thanks
a
for
couple
that.
times. Yeah.
And thank you, Jennifer, for being our wonderful tech moderator for the full year. And Nikki Tresvina is not with us today, but we think of her. And I want to wish you all very happy holidays,
Yeah.
and a nice new year. And then we'll be
Great New
back.
Year, everyone.
Going to be back. We got a lot of really great programs coming up in January and February. So thanks, Jeanette. Great
Yeah,
having you.
thank you. And
We'll
thanks,
turn
everyone. Happy holidays.
We'll turn it back to you, Jennifer. Happy holidays to you, Jennifer. See you next year. All right, folks.
Bye.